but I put a bunch of links in our chat. If you want to just copy and paste those onto a document, you'll have those. And to reiterate what Charla said, if you could follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, just sharing you don't have to write anything original, but if you just share with your networks, that helps amplify Claudia's message and really get it out there. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
You got things working. That's great. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to have not everybody, but Claudia, Paul, and Day will be introducing themselves, and then they'll be having a discussion around issues with public banking. And then as you have questions, if you'll type them into the chat box, I will monitor that. And then at the end, as there's time, I will ask those questions of the panel so that we can answer everything that you want to know about public banking. So I think the next thing that we're going to be doing is I'm going to ask Claudia to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Claudia Risner, Democratic candidate for Senate District 19, in case you didn't get the memo. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really interested in this topic. You know, when I heard about public banking, I thought, well, you know, the public can go to any bank, but it's a little more complicated than that, and there's a lot to it. So I am so flattered and honored to have Representative Day Hochman-Vigil and Mr. Paul Stull here today with the Credit Union Association of New Mexico. You two know a lot about public banking, and I think this is going to just take off. And like so many areas here in New Mexico, we can be a green leader, we can be a leader following behind North Dakota on keeping more of our economic resources here in New Mexico. So this is just another wonderful area that we can help recover from COVID, support our small businesses, and take our appropriate leadership role in the US. So I'm thrilled to be here. I don't want to talk anymore. We've got some real interesting speakers. Let's move right on to them. Thanks everyone for joining us. So Paul?
Thank you very much, Claudia. You started off great with, it's called a public bank, but the public can't use it. It's a little bit of a misnomer. It's a public bank because it's owned by the public, not because it serves the public. And what we mean by that, you can't walk in the door and open a checking account or take out an auto loan. It's not that kind of bank. There are no drive-up windows, and probably there'll only be one location. So it's not very convenient if you were the public. But for the state of New Mexico, it would be extremely convenient. Currently, the state of New Mexico takes all of the money that it has in excess of what they're going to spend and invests it in Wall Street banks and investment companies. And when they do that, those companies go out and in turn put our money, New Mexico's money, to work in communities across the world to finance shopping centers and all kinds of things. But those shopping centers and those businesses that they finance are not in New Mexico. So our money is going to help the economy of other places in the world and other places in the United States. A public bank allows us to keep those funds that we're currently giving to Wall Street right here in New Mexico. It's a wonderful idea because the money that goes to Wall Street now could be put into doing things that we desperately need in New Mexico. The number one thing is to create jobs. How do we create jobs with a public bank? Well, we invest in New Mexico. We invest in housing where it's needed. We invest in small businesses. We invest in schools, in healthcare facilities, in bringing broadband into rural communities. All kinds of things that New Mexico needs. And right now, the money that could finance those projects, well, it's just not here. It's not working for us in New Mexico. It's working for other communities all around the world. It's working for Wall Street bankers when they return an investment fee to their shareholders, but it's not working for New Mexicans. It's the way that business has always been done, But now for the first time, we have an opportunity to run our own bank, which means we're kind of like lending our own money to ourselves. It's kind of like if you have a small savings account, and rather than pay a finance company to buy a washer or a dryer or some appliance, you would take the money out of your savings account, buy it now, and then pay it back to yourself. And it's a way to make a sustainable difference in New Mexico. And sustainability is what we're all about with the public bank. In other words, it's not a project. We're not just doing this one time to solve an issue. We are making this an ongoing investment in New Mexico, because each time the funds from a project get paid back into the bank to pay off the loans, that money gets available again to be reinvested. So it's kind of a, I know I was talking with you the other day, it's kind of a Mobius loop. The money that we have goes into our communities, the communities grow jobs, jobs create a bigger tax base, and that brings money back into the bank again. Currently, the way it works is the tax money goes to Wall Street and it doesn't come back. So there's no loop, it's not a circle. So I don't view it as sustainable. And sustainable is really a green property. That's something that you know can go on indefinitely. It's not something that just gives you a benefit once. It makes permanent changes. And that's what we need in New Mexico, are permanent changes to help us move forward. One-time projects are great, but they don't continue to solve the problem. It would be nice to think that a one-time project could solve every housing issue in New Mexico, but we know very well that's not going to happen. These housing issues will continue to come up just as people come up through New Mexico to grow businesses, to grow jobs. They'll need more housing, and we continue to do that through the public bank. And it's a great way to harness New Mexico's power and use it right here in our state. I know that's kind of a long explanation, but that's what a public bank does.
That's very good. That's a very good, thorough explanation. You know, you said that sustainability is a green property, referring to kind of the environment, but frankly, it's our greenbacks too. So I see it working here for public banking. You've said some real positive things. Why don't we have public banking? Who is against it?
Well, I don't really know that anybody is against it except for maybe the Wall Street investment bankers, because it makes it a little bit harder for them to return a dividend to their shareholders. Now, we don't have anything against returning a dividend to shareholders. That's certainly fine. It's a common practice that goes on, but it just cuts New Mexico out of the investment that goes elsewhere. We like New Mexico. We live here. We want the jobs here. We want the housing here. We want care here. I'm sure that there are communities across the country and around the world that need all of those things. But hey, why don't we get our own investment right back in New Mexico? So probably the investment bankers wouldn't be too happy with that idea. Outside of that, I'm not quite sure who would be negatively impacted. Because as the state goes, all of us go. We all share in the economy. We all share in the things that the public bank can do. There are a great many things that the public bank can bring a power to bear on. And those are things that we have long been in need of in New Mexico. Healthcare is one that you might think, well, how is a public bank going to impact healthcare? Well, the public bank could invest in a facility like a building, maybe on tribal land somewhere, outfit it with the necessary equipment. We know we already have practitioners that would probably go there to work, but there's nowhere for them to work. There isn't a facility available. Public bank could invest in that. It would create new jobs, provide new services, to people that need health care in some of the most rural parts of New Mexico. The public bank could also be directed by our own legislature, our elected officials. The elected officials might say, we've identified 6 communities in New Mexico where we know housing is a problem. We would like you, public bank, to put together a program to lend money in those communities. The bank would put the program together, would recruit local credit unions and community bankers to make that money available, and it would address the housing issues in those 6 communities. And it would be very easy to demonstrate success because we'd have numbers. The legislature could hear back knowing that we'd built 300 houses or whatever the number might be, but there would be great accountability. Right now, that accountability is just kind of what it is, which doesn't track back to investing taxpayers' money in New Mexico. So there are many great things that could be done. The list is almost limitless. And because of that, I don't think that there would be a lot of folks that would be opposed to this idea. Giving yourself a loan is pretty good. You're probably a good creditor. And I think that almost anybody would think that investing in New Mexico, you can't go wrong.
Thanks. Well, I'd like to turn it over to Representative Day Hochman-Vigil. Please introduce yourself. Not everyone here knows you, and you're just doing a spectacular job. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on public banking.
Thanks so much, Claudia. Hi, everybody. So my name is Day Hochman-Vigil. My full name is Dayan, but I go by Day. And currently, I am the New Mexico State Representative for House District 15, which is the Northeast Heights, North Valley, and one precinct on the west side of Albuquerque. I am still in my first term. I was elected as part of the blue wave of amazing kick butt women who went up and answered the call for political office in 2018. I, am known Charla for several years. She and I have come up through the ranks together through the Democratic Party of New Mexico, and she helped get me elected in 18. And she's an incredible woman, and she asked me to speak to all of you on the topic of public banking because I was involved in running what's called a House Memorial in the 2019 legislative session to create a public bank. And so I'm going to focus a lot of my comments on that experience and what we could potentially expect if we were to run either a memorial or an actual bill a second time around. So in 2019, it was a much different atmosphere than where we find ourselves now. We had all these fresh, amazing, energized faces. We had tons of money. Sky was the limit. We were going to change everything in New Mexico. And we brought the memorial, which was quickly quashed by the large and deep lobbyist contingent up in Santa Fe for the privatized banking networks, which is actually unfortunate. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, because I think that the topic of public banking has largely been misunderstood as to how it can be leveraged as an asset to work with our private banks and co-ops and credit unions to actually cover all of the credit needs that our state has. So it didn't go anywhere as a memorial, but that's actually okay. And the reason why is, unfortunately, we find ourselves in the era of COVID now. We went from having unprecedented budgetary surpluses to unprecedented budgetary shortfalls. Our economy changed overnight, both on a state and a national level. And all of a sudden, we had the federal government implementing programs like the Paycheck Protection Program. We just went into the special session in June and we passed the Small Business Recovery Act, which allows for about $400 million from the state severance tax permanent fund to be given in low interest loans to New Mexico businesses who may not qualify for the PPP program or for whatever reason are unbankable or unbanking and just could not gain access to these resources while they lasted. So the topic of the public bank, I think, has found itself shoved in the limelight in that what the potentiality could be for a public bank in like the COVID era. So what that means in actuality, I'll try and translate that, is all of these loans that we are trying to make available for our small businesses, and we're screwed up so badly by the federal government with the route and implementation practices of the PPP, could have been expressly taken on by a public banking system and rolled out in probably a much more efficient and logical way. And so even though I think a public bank is a good idea, because again, it's an implementation, it is a tool that can be used and integrated with the private banking industry to cover all of the credit needs of our state and the people in our state. Right now, we find ourselves in a great position in that we can advertise what a public bank system could do for New Mexico now. And that means bring equitable relief to New Mexicans who are finding themselves in a position where they're losing their businesses, they're potentially losing their homes, they can't feed their families. And a lot of the private banks, either for whatever reason, because their first priority by law actually has to be their shareholders because they're a private bank, could actually pass on some of these higher risk loans to something like a public bank, because we have the freedom of allowing a public bank to take on that liability instead of pushing that onto private banks, which actually could not take that on in the best interest of their shareholders. So this is exactly the right time for this. And so when I was consulted earlier, should we bring the memorial back? I think we should bring a bill. Memorials, for those of you who may not know the difference or don't have as great of a grasp of the New Mexico legislative process, you usually bring a memorial in the case when you want to study something and you want to see whether or not it's a feasible policy change to make within the state. So a memorial says, hey, we think this might be a good idea. Let's put a little bit of money towards studying it, and then let's produce a report, and then let's see if we want to translate into a bill. So we're really lucky that we have a lot of data from states like North Dakota and their implementation of a public bank that tells us that, especially now, this would be a good idea. And I think that just, it's good public policy right now. I think that we have a lot of supporters who can come up to the legislature and testify. It'll probably be over Zoom. The Speaker of the House slipped the other day on an interim meeting and admitted that we're probably going to be legislating by Zoom in January this coming year. So I don't know if he meant to do that, but I'm sure it's not too far off, something to expect. But we have people come and testify. If I had access to a PPP loan as provided through a public banking system, this would have saved my business, this would have saved my family, and it would have saved my home. That's really powerful stuff. And that's exactly the inertia that we need behind this idea to kind of, get through some of the reservations that were expressed before. Also, I think it's incumbent upon people like all of us and me to actually talk with the private banking industry and let them know that this actually is not a threat. This would actually help supplement the credit needs throughout the state of New Mexico, help give them an alternative to riskier loans that they may not want to take on themselves, so that we can kind of get the opponents to back off a little bit and even turn them around. I love doing stuff like this. I represent a swing district, and I have to work across the lines all the time, and I just love passing bipartisan policy. So if anybody has any comments or questions about the process, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help. And also thanks for inviting me on today, Claudia. I'm really happy to be here.
So we have tons of questions started coming into the chat, but Paul, I wanted to give you a chance if there's anything you wanted to add to that before the Q&A. I think probably she probably sparked a few things that I saw you go, oh yeah. So anyway, would you like a couple minutes to add?
I'm very pleased that there is that level of understanding. We've been working with a think tank, the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity. They have really kind of done the study in the memorial, and they have gotten so far as to have created a pro forma, and currently a bill is being drafted that we are ready to introduce in the next legislative session. So we welcome that support. We also know that a public and private partnership between credit unions and community banks and the public bank will do more for New Mexico, because banks and credit unions now can leverage dollars they have. The public bank would be able to guarantee loans, would also be able to loans through those community banking institutions. And that really kind of pulls and triples every dollar back into the state of New Mexico. So those are really strong reasons to do this. And I love the idea of bringing folks to the legislature who could have benefited from a public bank if we'd had it online during the COVID crisis. But just because we didn't have it online this time doesn't mean we can't be ready for the future. And there is absolutely no shortage of need in New Mexico to improve jobs, to improve economic development. And that's why the credit of New Mexico, and I'm the president, chief executive officer of the Credit Union Association of New Mexico. We support this. We have endorsed the idea because we believe the stronger New Mexico is, the stronger our ability to help communities and credit union members. It goes hand in hand. So the public-private partnership between banks, credit unions, and the public bank is a very powerful combination. And our state legislator definitely gets that idea. And that's what we're very excited about. So that will, those were just great comments that we heard from Day, and I really appreciate her enthusiasm to want to move this forward.
I'd like to take just a minute, Paul, since you brought up Aflac. Sarah Manning, are you still on board? Sarah, would you unmute yourself?
There we are. Hi.
Please introduce yourself. Take a minute and tell us about this wonderful think tank.
Wonderful. I'd be happy to. The Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity is a long, unpronounceable title, but it really says what we're trying to do. This group was made up of basically several groups around the state, all of which have been working for establishing a public bank in New Mexico. But we decided it was time to merge and really just focus on having a state bank for the first time. And so we have followed, we studied in the very beginning, we started studying the Bank of North Dakota, which has been around for over 100 years now. And that bank has had an amazing impact on North Dakota. North Dakota and New Mexico are fairly similar. We're both border states. We have large native populations. We have oil and gas. We're rural. We don't have really big cities. We've got wide open spaces. The wind blows all the time. So there are a lot of similarities. Oh, and low population, basically per square mile. And what the Bank of North Dakota has been able to do is nurture its economy by using its local banks to such a degree that there are more local banks, community banks, and credit unions in the state of North Dakota per capita than anywhere else in the country. Their population is a little bit less than ours. They have many more community banks. We currently have 34 community banks in the state. That's down in the last 20 years. We've lost about 20 banks. That's losing about one bank a year because they get bought up by larger interstate banks. And then when they get bought up, they lose the ability to make decisions at the local level. So the money is leaving the state and the decision-making capacity is also losing, moving out of the state. And what we really want to do is change that. We want to have an environment that is much friendlier for our community banks and credit unions so that there will actually be fewer unbanked communities. But everything that I have heard people talk about, what Paul said was absolutely correct. Day, you were very correct on the experience in the legislature last time around. We are doing a bill that would establish a state-owned public bank. And it's our anticipation that the state bank will start small and over time get larger. So we're not going to take all the money that is being managed now by the SIC, the State Investment Council, and take it away from them and put it into the state bank. We're going to, with a small amount, probably coming from the Land Grant Permanent Trust Fund. And that will be what capitalizes the bank. Then the state will begin diverting small amounts of money to begin with, small meaning 50,000, excuse me, 50 million to start with. And that would start being able to help be deposited into the local banks, and then they'd be able to have a greater pool from which they can make loans. And we're not trying to get rid of all bonds, but the advantage of the public bank is that it does not have advertising. It does not have ATMs. It does not have branches. It does not have massive employees. So its overhead is much cheaper, which means that it can make loans to other banks much more cheaply, so they can pass that saving on to their consumers and the industries and the public that they serve.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And
My pleasure.
please, in the chat, put it in your website so people who might be more interested in finding out information about what you're doing can go to your website, okay? All right, Sandy, take it
Will
away
do.
for questions.
If you don't mind, just really quick before we start on Q&A, did you, sorry, I was answering a question on my text about tech. Did you just bring up Day's stuff?
No.
Okay, great. So Representative Hochman-Vigil, at this moment, if you would like to remember that Day is also running for her own office in House District 15. So if you are interested in helping her out at all, Day, if you wouldn't mind, put your website, your donate link, any upcoming events that you have coming up, if you wouldn't mind putting them in the chat, we'd be so happy to have any support for you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charla.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Charla, the consummate campaign person.
Of course. And then
reminding me of what I need to be doing.
Sandy, I don't envy you right now. You've got about 1 million questions in the chat, so I'm going to hand it to you to do.
Okay. And these are fabulous questions. Thank you so much for putting those in. And let's see. The first one, Kay Monaco was on this. How long has North Dakota had a public bank? Has there been an analysis of what the impact has been in North Dakota? And why haven't other states done this? Paul, maybe you want to take this?
Yeah, I know Sarah could answer it, but Paul or Day, sure.
I don't, I'm not an expert on the North Dakota Bank. I know that it's been in existence for over 100 years. It has provided revenue to the state of North Dakota. It does have revenue in excess of its expenses. So it does return an investment or dividend to the state of North Dakota. And I believe that North Dakota has had the opportunity to maintain many of its community banks and credit unions where other states have lost those partners. And one of the biggest engines that drives economic development in any state are local financial institutions. They know the state's needs the best, and they know how to invest in their own state. So that's my North Dakota. Day, you may have some other information.
So